Elias Ward sat alone in the delivery room, the chair pulled too close to the bed, as if proximity could undo what had already happened. The newborn slept against his chest, impossibly small, her breath shallow, but steady. Each rise and fall felt like proof of life, stubbornly insisting on continuing. Naomi Ward should have been there. Her side of the bed was empty, the sheets stripped and replaced with crisp white ones that smelled sharply of disinfectant. The scent clung to the air, clean and unforgiving, as if the room itself had been reset. The machines still hummed, the monitors still blinked. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled past, wheels squeaking rhythmically. Laughter drifted faintly from a nurse's station. Nothing in the room acknowledged that a woman had died there. Elias stared at the spot where Naomi's hand had been hours ago. He could still picture it, fingers trembling, gripping the rail, as if the metal could anchor her to the world. He waited for someone to come in. A doctor, a nurse, anyone. Someone to say something that would make sense of the silence. No one came. No apology followed. No explanation arrived. No voice said, "We should have done more." A nurse eventually slipped in, avoiding his eyes as she checked the baby's bracelet. Her movements were careful, professional, practiced. She smiled softly at the child, murmured something about beautiful lungs, then turned to leave. "Excuse me," Elias said quietly. She froze for half a second, then turned back. "Yes, sir." "My wife," he said. The word caught in his throat, foreign already. "Is someone going to talk to me?" Her expression tightened just enough to notice. "The doctor will be by later. Administration too. I'm very sorry for your loss." Loss. Not death. Not failure. Loss, as if Naomi had simply wandered off. The door closed again, gently, respectfully, sealing him back into the room. Elias looked down at his daughter. She shifted slightly, a small sound escaping her lips. Alive. She was alive, and yet the weight in his chest didn't lift. It only spread, slow and suffocating, because somewhere deep inside, he understood the truth before anyone said it out loud. This wasn't a tragedy to them. It was paperwork. He noticed details he hadn't before. The chart already clipped to the door, fresh pages, clean handwriting, no red flags, no urgency. The past had been rewritten while he sat there holding the future. After that night at the hospital, nothing could ever be corrected. The sentence repeated in his mind, not as a thought, but as a verdict. He didn't know where it came from. It simply existed, heavy and absolute, like gravity. He replayed the hours leading up to now without seeing them, only feeling the echo they left behind. Naomi's voice, the edge of fear she tried to hide, the way the room never quite filled with the help she kept asking for. He didn't remember shouting. He remembered waiting. And the waiting had won. Outside the door, life continued with institutional efficiency. Shift changes, chart updates, coffee refills. Somewhere, a doctor was already explaining another case with confident detachment. Somewhere, a hallway light flickered and was promptly replaced. The system did not pause for grief. Elias pressed his forehead lightly against his daughter's head. She smelled like clean cotton and something faintly metallic. He closed his eyes just for a moment and imagined Naomi sitting where he was, humming under her breath the way she always did when she was nervous. The image collapsed almost immediately, too fragile to hold. What terrified him most wasn't the silence. It was the order. Everything was too neat, too resolved, as if the conclusion had been decided long before Naomi ever walked through those doors, as if her death fit cleanly into a structure designed to absorb it without leaving a mark. He finally understood what had been taken from him. Not just Naomi, not just the life they planned, but the belief that fairness lived somewhere inside these walls. The belief that doing everything right was enough. Elias opened his eyes. The monitors blinked back at him, indifferent and precise. He stayed seated, unmoving, holding his daughter in the quiet aftermath, while the hospital carried on around him exactly as it was built to do. A few hours earlier, the pain arrived without warning. Naomi Ward had been standing in their kitchen, one hand braced against the counter, the other resting low on her belly. She paused mid-sentence, breath catching sharply as if the air had been knocked out of her. Elias looked up from his phone. "You okay?" Naomi shook her head slowly. That wasn't a contraction. Her voice was tight, careful. That felt wrong. She tried to smile it away, the way she always did when she did not want to worry him, but her skin had already gone pale beneath its warmth, a sheen of sweat gathering at her temples. Elias moved. Instantly, slipping into the calm he trusted more than instinct. "All right," he said evenly. "Let's get you checked." "Probably nothing. We'll follow protocol." Protocol. The word steadied him. It always had. At the hospital, fluorescent lights washed the color from everything. Naomi sat hunched in a wheelchair as another wave of pain bent her forward. Her fingers dug into Elias's sleeve. "This is not normal," she whispered. "Elias, something's tearing." "I know," he said, though his voice remained measured. "You're in the right place." He believed that. He needed to. Dr. Preston Hargrove entered the triage area with an unhurried stride, chart tucked neatly under his arm. Silver hair, relaxed posture, the confidence of a man used to being deferred to. "Mrs. Ward," he said pleasantly, "first pregnancy can feel overwhelming. Anxiety has a way of amplifying discomfort." Naomi looked at him, eyes glossy. "This isn't anxiety. I know my body." Hargrove smiled, thin and reassuring. Pain perception varies widely, especially under stress. Elias noticed how quickly the doctor stopped looking at Naomi and started addressing him instead. "Blood pressure is elevated," Hargrove continued, as if reciting from memory. "That happens." Nurse Tessa Glenn stepped closer, glancing at the monitor. "Doctor, her numbers are still climbing, and she's reporting vision changes." Hargrove did not turn toward her. "Let's not escalate prematurely." Tessa hesitated. With respect, these symptoms together could indicate something more serious. The temperature in the room shifted. Hargrove finally looked at her, eyes cool. "I will decide when it is serious." Elias felt the familiar tightening in his chest. His training urged him to press. His lived experience told him to slow down. He kept his voice low, controlled. "Doctor, my wife is in a lot of pain." Hargrove nodded, already half turning away. "Pain does not equal danger," Naomi cried out softly as another contraction hit, sharper than before. Elias squeezed her hand, forcing himself to remain composed. He knew how this worked. A black man raising his voice in a hospital did not get faster care. He got security. He chose restraint. Again. They moved Naomi to a curtained space in the hallway. "No room yet," they said. "Just observation." The monitor beeped steadily, too steadily for Elias's comfort. Tessa lingered, adjusting the cuff on Naomi's arm. "I'll keep checking," she whispered. "I don't like this." Hargrove passed by moments later, already distracted by something on his phone. Let her rest. Anxiety feeds pain. Naomi turned her head toward Elias, tears streaking silently down her cheeks. "Please," she said, "don't let them send me home." "We're not going anywhere," he promised, though doubt had begun to creep in around the edges of his certainty. This was the illusion he clung to. That calm. Behavior led to good outcomes. That systems rewarded compliance. That if he did everything right, nothing truly bad could happen. Down the hallway, a red emergency light flickered briefly, then steadied. Elias noticed it and felt an unexpected sense of relief. "See," he told himself, "they're prepared. Everything is under control." The pain no longer came in waves. It stayed. Naomi lay rigid on the narrow bed, her breathing shallow and uneven, eyes wide with a fear she was no longer trying to hide. Her hand clutched Elias's wrist with surprising strength. "I can't feel her," she said. "Elias, I can't feel the baby anymore." He leaned closer, lowering his voice instinctively. "Okay, listen to me. We're going to tell them right now." "I already told them," she whispered, tears spilling freely now. "They don't believe me." The monitor beside her began to beep faster, not loud yet, but insistent. A sound that demanded attention. Elias turned toward it, his chest tightening as the numbers flickered in ways he did not like. Nurse Tessa Glenn stepped in quickly, eyes darting to the screen. "That's not right," she murmured. Her fingers moved across the controls, checking leads. Her pressure's dropping, and the fetal heart rate is... The alarm spiked, sharp, urgent, impossible to ignore. Naomi gasped. Her body arched slightly as panic surged through her. "Something's wrong. Please, please don't let them ignore this." Elias opened his mouth to shout for help. Dr. Preston Hargrove appeared almost immediately, as if summoned by the sound. He glanced at the monitor, unimpressed, then reached out and pressed a button. The alarm died. The sudden silence was worse than the noise. "There," Hargrove said calmly. "False reading. These hallway monitors are notorious for that. Tessa stared at him. Doctor, the pattern, it's interference. He cut in smoothly. Movement, anxiety, poor lead contact. Happens all the time. Naomi stared at the now quiet machine in disbelief. It was screaming, she said. It was telling you something. Hargrove finally looked at her, his expression patient in the way people get when they are done listening. You're frightened. Fear amplifies sensation. Let's all take a breath. Elias felt his pulse pounding in his ears. Every instinct he had was screaming now. This was wrong. This was not protocol. This was not caution. This was dismissal. He imagined himself raising his voice, stepping forward, demanding another doctor, demanding a room, demanding action. He also imagined the response: security, hands on his shoulders, a calm voice telling him to step away. Naomi left alone behind a curtain while he was escorted out for being disruptive. He had seen it happen before, not to him, but close enough. Dr. Hargrove straightened the chart. She needs rest. Stress is not helping the baby. The words landed hard. Elias swallowed, his jaw clenched. He forced his voice into something even, controlled, respectful. Okay, he said. We trust you. Naomi turned her head toward him slowly. Her eyes searched his face, not accusing, just terrified. Elias, I'm right here, he said quickly. I'm not going anywhere. Hargrove nodded once, satisfied, and walked away. The monitor remained quiet, too quiet. Elias sat back down, heart hammering, telling himself the same thing over and over. This is how you protect her. This is how you keep control. You stay calm. You don't make yourself the problem. Naomi squeezed his hand weakly. I'm scared. I know, he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. Just hold on. Down the hall, something shattered the stillness. A scream, raw, sudden, violent. It cut through the hospital like glass breaking, and Elias knew in the instant it echoed that the choice he had just made could never be taken back. The scream did not stop. It tore through the hallway again, louder this time, closer. Elias felt it in his bones before he recognized Naomi's voice inside it. The sound was not pain alone. It was terror. It was something breaking. He was on his feet before he realized he had moved. Help! He called out, his control slipping. She needs help now. Naomi's body jerked against the bed. Her face had gone pale, lips trembling, eyes unfocused. The monitor that had been quiet moments ago began to stutter, then spiked into chaos. Tessa rushed back in, her composure gone. Her pressure's crashing, she said sharply. Doctor, we need... The alarm shrieked again. Dr. Hargrove reappeared, irritation flashing across his face as he took in the scene. What is all this noise? Before anyone could stop him, he reached out and silenced the alarm again. The room fell into a thick, unnatural quiet, broken only by Naomi's ragged breathing. There is no reason to panic, he said, his voice firm, authoritative. You're upsetting her. Elias stared at him. She's not upset, he said, louder now. She's fading. Hargrove turned slowly. Sir, you need to lower your voice. Naomi's hand slipped from Elias's grip. Her fingers twitched once, then went still. That was the moment something inside him snapped. Naomi, Elias said urgently. Hey, look at me. Her eyes rolled back slightly. Her chest shuddered. Tessa slammed the emergency button with her palm. Code, she shouted. We need a code now. The hallway exploded into motion, footsteps, voices, a gurney crashing into a wall, someone shouting orders that overlapped and tangled. The alarm screamed again, this time from another machine, impossible to silence quickly. Hargrove stood frozen for half a second too long. Then the room filled with people, hands pressed against Naomi's stomach, oxygen forced over her face, numbers plummeting on screens, blood appearing where there should not have been any. Elias was pushed back hard. Sir, you need to step out. No, he said, fighting to stay upright. I'm not leaving her. Now, a voice barked. He stumbled against the wall, watching helplessly as the bed was surrounded, as Naomi's body was no longer hers, but a problem to be solved too late. He saw Tessa's face, white with fear, eyes locked on the doctor as if begging him to understand the gravity of what was happening. We need surgery, she said. Now. Hargrove hesitated, just for a moment. Just long enough. Prep the OR, he said finally, but document that this escalation was abrupt. Document. The word echoed in Elias's head as Naomi was rushed past him, her arm dangling off the side of the bed, fingers brushing the air as if reaching for something already gone. "Elias," she whispered. It was barely sound, but it was his name. "I'm here," he said, trying to follow, blocked immediately by a pair of hands on his chest. "I'm right here." The doors slammed shut. He was left alone in the hallway, the echo of her scream still vibrating in his ears. Minutes blurred into each other, or hours. He did not know. The hospital resumed its strange rhythm around him. A janitor mopped the floor where blood had spilled. A nurse laughed softly at the end of the hall. Somewhere, a baby cried. Finally, a young resident emerged. His scrubs were stained dark. His face looked older than it should have. "The baby," Elias said immediately. "Is my daughter okay?" The resident nodded, swallowing hard. "She's alive. She's in the NICU. She's stable." Relief surged so fast it almost knocked him over. "And my wife." The resident's eyes dropped. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "We did everything we could." The hallway tilted. Elias grabbed the wall to stay upright. "No," he said. "No, you didn't. You didn't even listen." The resident flinched, then stepped aside as Dr. Hargrove approached, already speaking into a recorder. "Patient experienced sudden complications," Hargrove said evenly. "Rapid deterioration despite appropriate monitoring. Outcome unavoidable given presentation." Elias lunged forward. "You turned the alarms off." Hargrove stopped recording and looked at him with something close to annoyance. "Sir, I understand this is difficult, but—" "You turned them off," Elias said again, his voice breaking. "She begged you." Security appeared almost instantly, as if summoned by tone rather than action. "Sir, please calm down," one of them said. "My wife is dead," Elias said, "and you're telling me to calm down." Hargrove adjusted his coat. "These things happen, especially when patients don't manage stress well." That was when Elias understood the true cost of the choice he had made. He had stayed quiet to protect her, and his silence had protected everyone else instead. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried. His baby. And Naomi Ward was already being turned into a footnote. Naomi Ward died under fluorescent lights while strangers spoke in calm, efficient voices. That was how it was explained to Elias. Not with details, not with truth, with tone. A young doctor stood across from him, hands folded too neatly, eyes never quite meeting his. "There were complications during the emergency procedure," he said. "Sometimes these things escalate very quickly. Sometimes." Elias waited for the rest, for the sentence where someone admitted they had missed something, for the moment when a voice cracked and said, "We should have listened sooner." It never came. "The baby survived," the doctor added quickly, as if that might soften the blow. "She's stable. You can see her shortly." Elias nodded because his body still knew how to respond, even when his mind did not. He felt hollow, like something essential had been scooped out of him and discarded without ceremony. They handed him paperwork before they handed him time. Consent forms, notification forms, forms that needed signatures while his wife's body was still warm somewhere behind closed doors. Each page was filled with careful language, vague phrases that said nothing and meant everything. Unforeseen event, rapid decline, all appropriate measures taken. He read those words again and again, searching for Naomi between the lines. She wasn't there. When he finally saw his daughter, she was wrapped tightly in plastic and wires, her chest rising and falling with mechanical assistance. She looked impossibly small, her skin darker than the blanket beneath her. Alive, because someone, somewhere, had finally acted. Too late for Naomi. Back in the hallway, Elias began to notice the change. Nurses who had spoken kindly to him earlier now avoided eye contact. Conversation stopped when he approached. A resident whispered something to another staff member, both of them glancing at him before quickly looking away. He caught fragments as he passed. "He's having a hard time. Understandably emotional. Needs space." By the time Gail Renshaw introduced herself, the narrative had already shifted. She was composed in a way that felt rehearsed. Perfect hair, soft voice, a face trained to express concern without ever absorbing it. "Mr. Ward," she said gently, extending her hand. "I'm so sorry for your loss. This must be unimaginable." Elias did not shake her hand. She did not seem to mind. Our hearts go out to your family, she continued. The hospital takes these situations very seriously. Then why does it feel like no one's taking responsibility? Elias asked quietly. Renshaw smiled with practiced sympathy. Right now, it's important to focus on healing, on your baby, on moving forward. She paused, just long enough for the silence to do its work. There are resources available, she added. Counseling, support, and of course, we want to make sure your family is taken care of. He understood the implication before she finished. Compensation, closure, silence. I want the full medical record, Elias said. Her smile thinned slightly. Of course, we'll provide everything that's appropriate. Appropriate. As she walked away, Elias felt it settle over him like a label being quietly attached. Difficult, emotional, unstable. Not a grieving husband, not a man asking reasonable questions. A problem. He watched staff move efficiently around him, the hospital already adjusting, smoothing itself back into order. Naomi's absence was being absorbed into the system with alarming ease, and for the first time, Elias sensed something colder than grief taking shape. The truth was already being reshaped, and so was he. By morning, the hospital had decided what Naomi Ward's death would mean. Elias learned this not from an announcement, but from the way the air around him shifted. Conversations lowered when he passed, smiles tightened. The warmth that had existed the night before evaporated, replaced by something cautious, something guarded. He sat in a small consultation room with beige walls and no windows, his daughter sleeping in a clear bassinet beside him. A nurse he did not recognize placed a folder on the table and slid it toward him without sitting down. These are the preliminary records, she said. The finalized report will take some time. Elias opened the folder. The words hit him harder than he expected. Patient presented with anxiety-related symptoms. Rapid deterioration despite appropriate intervention. No indication of equipment malfunction. He looked up slowly. This isn't what happened. The nurse's mouth tightened. This is what's documented. He flipped through the pages, his hands steady even as something inside him began to shake. Times didn't line up. Interventions were listed before requests had been made. Alarms were referenced without any mention of urgency. Naomi's voice was nowhere to be found. She said she couldn't feel the baby. Elias said, "That's not here." The nurse shifted her weight. "I wasn't in the room for all of it." "But someone was," he replied. She met his eyes for a brief moment, and something flickered there. Regret, fear. Then it was gone. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "That's all I can tell you." Later, when Elias stood outside the NICU watching his daughter breathe, a resident approached him cautiously. "I just wanted to say," the young man began, then stopped. He swallowed. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Did you see what happened?" Elias asked. The resident glanced down the hall, then back at Elias. His voice dropped. "I saw enough to know it wasn't simple." Before Elias could ask more, the resident straightened. "I should get back." He walked away quickly, shoulders tense, as if every step carried risk. By the afternoon, Gail Renshaw returned. This time she brought coffee. "I know this is overwhelming," she said, setting the cup down gently. "You've been through something no family should ever experience." Elias did not touch the coffee. "We've reviewed the situation," she continued, "and while there was no deviation from medical standards, we do recognize the emotional toll this has taken." "No deviation," Elias repeated. "My wife is dead." Renshaw nodded sympathetically. "And that is a tragedy, which is why we want to support you, financially, practically." She slid a single page across the table. "Not a check. Not yet. Just language. We find that resolving these matters privately allows families to grieve without added stress," she said. "Legal processes can be very painful." Elias stared at the paper. "You're asking me to disappear," he said. "I'm asking you to protect yourself," she replied smoothly. "Anger can look unstable, especially so soon after a loss." There it was. The shift was complete. Not a man seeking answers, a grieving husband losing control. A liability. Elias pushed the paper back toward her. "I want the truth." Renshaw's expression did not change, but her tone cooled. "Of course. In time." When she left, Elias noticed two security officers standing a little closer than before. Not threatening, just present, watching. He looked down at his daughter, her tiny fingers curling reflexively in sleep. Naomi's fingers had done that same thing when she was nervous, when she needed grounding. He understood now what was happening. The hospital was not defending itself against accusations. It was redefining reality. By the end of the day, Elias was no longer a witness. He was a risk, and the version of Naomi that would survive in official records was already being stripped of urgency, of credibility, of truth. As he stood there, holding his child, Elias felt something fundamental slip away. Not just his wife, but the assumption that honesty mattered more than convenience. The system had chosen its story, and his dignity was being quietly edited out of it. The first crack appeared in the timestamps. Elias noticed it late at night, sitting at his kitchen table while his daughter slept in a bassinet a few feet away. The house was quiet in the way homes become quiet after something irreversible has happened. Too still, too empty. He had spread the hospital records across the table, page after page of sanitized language. He was not reading for emotion anymore. He was reading like an investigator. One medication was administered before it was ordered. One vital sign stabilized minutes before it had crashed. One alarm was referenced that had never been acknowledged in real time. Small things, the kind most people would never notice, the kind Elias was trained to see. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. This was not sloppy. It was deliberate. Someone had gone back and made the story cleaner, calmer, less urgent. Naomi's fear had been erased. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. Mr. Ward, a man's voice said when Elias answered. Friendly, almost casual. This is Detective Vince Mallory with the local precinct. I was hoping we could talk. They met the next afternoon at Elias's house. Mallory arrived without a uniform, carrying coffee like a neighbor stopping by. Mid-40s, easy smile. The kind of man people trusted because he never looked like he was trying. First off, Mallory said, settling into a chair without being invited, I'm sorry about your wife, truly. Then why are you here? Elias asked. Mallory chuckled lightly. Just checking in, making sure everything's okay. Elias watched him carefully. It's not. Mallory nodded sympathetically. Of course it's not. Grief does that. Makes people see patterns that aren't there. Elias didn't respond. Mallory continued, lowering his voice slightly. Hospitals are complicated places. A lot of moving parts. Sometimes things don't go the way we want. You're not here to talk about medicine, Elias said. Mallory smiled. You're sharp. He glanced briefly toward the bassinet. Beautiful baby. Naomi, right? No. That was your wife. What's her name? Elias felt a chill. Why does that matter? It doesn't, Mallory said quickly. Just reminding you what's important. The message landed exactly where it was meant to. Look, Mallory said, leaning forward. I'd hate to see you put yourself through hell chasing something that's not going to give you peace, especially now. You got a kid to think about. So that's the advice, Elias said. Don't ask questions. I'm saying be careful, Mallory replied gently. People under a lot of stress sometimes make decisions they regret. After he left, Elias stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the street. Mallory's car didn't pull away right away. 2 days later, the call from the bureau came. Elias, his supervisor said, voice clipped and official. You're being placed on administrative leave, effective immediately. For what? Elias asked, though he already knew. Conflict of interest, she said. Given your personal involvement, it's best you step back. Step back from his wife's death, from altered records, from a system quietly closing ranks. That night, his phone rang again. It was Nurse Tessa Glenn. Her voice was shaking. Elias, someone broke into my house. His stomach dropped. Are you okay? I think so, she said. They didn't take anything. Not really, just my laptop, my notes. There was a pause. They knew where to look. When the call ended, Elias sat alone in the dark, listening to his daughter breathe. The pattern was no longer subtle. This was not about a mistake. This was pressure. This was containment. And whatever had killed Naomi was still very much alive. Tessa Glenn was discharged from the hospital the next morning. Officially, it was a burglary gone wrong. No suspects, no leads. A report filed and quietly shelved. Elias read the summary online and recognized the same careful emptiness he had seen in Naomi's chart. Unclear circumstances, no evidence of targeted intent. Victim advised to remain cautious. He drove to see her anyway. Tessa's house smelled faintly of bleach. Drawers were still pulled out. A bookshelf leaned at an angle it hadn't before. She sat at her kitchen table with an ice pack pressed to her jaw, eyes ringed with exhaustion. "They didn't touch my TV," she said. "Didn't touch my purse. They went straight to my desk." "What was on the laptop?" Elias asked. "Notes," she said quietly. "Screenshots. Times. Things I noticed that didn't make sense." She swallowed. "Things I was going to give you." Elias felt something settle in his chest. Heavy. Final. "Do you want to file a complaint?" he asked. She gave a bitter laugh. "With who?" They sat in silence for a moment. Then Tessa leaned forward, lowering her voice. "They want me scared. And it's working." That night, Elias didn't sleep. He cleared out the spare bedroom and turned it into something else. He taped copies of hospital records to the wall, printed emails, phone logs, handwritten notes. He drew lines between names and dates, moments and decisions. Hargrove, Renshaw, Mallory. The more he looked, the more the pattern revealed itself. Not chaos, not incompetence. Coordination. Every delay had a reason. Every softened phrase had a purpose. Every intervention came only after it was safe enough to document, not early enough to save. Naomi had not fallen through cracks. She had been guided into them. Elias picked up a marker and hesitated. For weeks, he had tried to believe there was a misunderstanding, a lapse, a mistake that could be corrected with enough evidence and calm persistence. That belief was gone now. He wrote a single word at the top of the wall, pressing hard enough that the marker squeaked. Intent. He stepped back and looked at it. This was not about negligence. It was not about fear. It was not even about prejudice alone. It was about choice. Someone had chosen convenience over care, silence over safety, control over life, and they had counted on him to stay quiet. Elias felt the last thread of hesitation snap. The system had made its move. Now he would make his. The first name did not mean anything to Elias. He found it buried 3 pages deep in a public health report he had downloaded at 2 in the morning. The house dark except for the glow of his laptop. His daughter slept nearby, unaware that her father was quietly dismantling the story he had once believed. Keisha Monroe, age 30. Cause of death listed as postpartum complications. Location Metropolitan General Hospital. Elias stared at the name longer than necessary. Something about it tugged. At him, not emotionally, but structurally. It sat too comfortably beside Naomi's case. Same hospital, same vague language, same absence of urgency. He searched the name. Another article appeared. Local news. 2 paragraphs long. No photos. A quote from hospital administration expressing sympathy. A mention of unavoidable medical circumstances. He scrolled. Another name surfaced. Angela Brooks. 34. Same hospital, same phrasing. By dawn, Elias had a list. 5 women, then 6, then 8. All black. All pregnant, all reported intense pain that was minimized, all experienced sudden deterioration after hours of waiting, all died under language that sounded eerily familiar. He leaned back in his chair, hands trembling now despite his effort to stay composed. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't bad luck. It was a pattern hiding in plain sight, disguised as statistics and softened language. Each death treated as an isolated event, safely contained within paperwork that never spoke to the next, until someone bothered to line them up. His phone buzzed, a message from a number he did not recognize. "I saw your wife's name. You're not crazy. Call me." Elias hesitated only a moment before dialing. A woman answered. Her voice was older, worn. "My name is Lorraine Davis," she said. "My daughter died there 3 years ago." They met later that week in a diner just outside the city. Neutral ground, public, safe. Lorraine brought a manila folder with softened edges. Inside were medical bills, discharge summaries, letters from lawyers she never hired. "They told me she was hysterical," Lorraine said quietly, stirring her coffee she never drank. "Said she didn't follow instructions. Said her body failed her." Elias felt his jaw tighten. "Did they offer you money?" Lorraine nodded once. "They said it would help me move on." He showed her Naomi's chart. Lorraine did not need long to read it. "They used the same words," she whispered. "Same excuses." Elias left the diner knowing something he could no longer ignore. Dr. Preston Hargrove had been present in 4 of the cases, present but never blamed. He dug deeper. Hospital board minutes revealed Gail Renshaw's signature approving quiet settlements. Police reports showed Detective Vince Mallory listed as a liaison in multiple investigations that went nowhere. Court filings revealed the same judge signing off on sealed agreements again and again. The realization hit him slowly, then all at once. This was not a doctor abusing authority. This was authority protecting itself. Medicine, administration, law enforcement, judicial silence, each layer absorbing the shock of death so the next could remain clean. And at the center of it all was the assumption that these women would not be missed loudly enough to matter. Elias closed his laptop and sat in the dark, Naomi's voice echoing in his memory. I know my body. She had known. They had chosen not to listen, and he had helped them by staying quiet. The thought cut deeper than anything else. His silence had not been neutral. It had been useful. For the first time since Naomi died, Elias did not feel only grief or anger. He felt clarity. If he stopped now, Naomi would become another name in a file, another lesson no one learned, another woman absorbed into a system that thrived on compliance. He looked toward the bassinet where his daughter slept, tiny chest rising steadily. Stopping was no longer an option, even if it cost him his job, even if it cost him his safety, even if it cost him everything else. The truth had already taken too much. He would not let it take his voice too. The last illusion shattered quietly, not with an arrest, not with a confession, but with a memory Elias could no longer defend. He sat alone in his car outside the hospital parking garage, engine off, rain streaking the windshield. He had not planned to come back here. His body had brought him on its own, drawn to the place where everything had still seemed fixable. He replayed the night again. Not the pain, not the screaming, the pauses, the moments when someone hesitated, when a nurse spoke and was silenced, when he felt anger rise and pushed it back down. He had called it discipline. He had called it intelligence. He had called it survival. Now he saw it for what it was: training. The same conditioning that told him how to survive interrogations had taught him how to survive institutions. Stay calm. Don't escalate. Trust procedure. Don't become the problem. That night, the system had not needed him to fight it. It had needed him to cooperate. Elias closed his eyes and felt the weight of it settle fully for the first time. Dr. Hargrove had not acted alone. He could not have. Every alarm silenced required permission, explicit or implied. Every delayed response required a culture where questioning authority was punished. Every altered record required hands willing to rewrite reality in exchange for comfort and protection. And above all of it, a justice system willing to look the other way when the victims fit a familiar profile: poorer, black, pregnant, female, disposable. The realization did not come with relief. It came with shame. Elias had believed that silence kept Naomi safe, that restraint protected her, that playing by the rules meant the rules would protect them in return. Instead, his silence had made him predictable, useful. He thought of Lorraine Davis sitting across from him in that diner, her hands trembling as she said her daughter's name out loud for the first time in years. He thought of Tessa Glenn flinching every time a car slowed outside her house. He thought of the judge's signature appearing again and again beneath sealed agreements. This was not corruption in the shadows. It was corruption in daylight, hidden by politeness and protocol. Elias stepped out of the car and looked up at the hospital building. Lights glowed warmly behind glass. From the outside, it looked calm, reassuring, safe. Inside, it was a machine that decided who could be ignored, and it would continue deciding until someone disrupted it loudly enough to matter. His phone vibrated. A message from his supervisor, short and precise. You are ordered to cease all independent inquiries. This is not a request. Elias stared at the screen for a long moment, then locked the phone and slid it into his pocket. That was the last permission he would ever wait for. He walked back to his car and drove home, not to rest, but to prepare. The evidence wall was waiting. The names, the timelines, the connections that no longer frightened him. At home, he stood in front of the board, marker in hand. He added nothing this time. He didn't need to. The truth was complete now. What had killed Naomi was not a single decision in a single room. It was a system that relied on silence, on compliance, on people like him believing that calm obedience was the same as justice. Elias looked at his sleeping daughter, her face peaceful, untouched by the world that had already failed her mother. "I won't be quiet again," he said aloud, not as a promise, but as a fact. Whatever came next would strip him of protection, of status, of safety. He accepted that, because stopping now would mean accepting that Naomi's life had been an acceptable loss, and that was something Elias Ward would never allow. Not anymore. The trap did not feel like victory while it was being built. Elias met Laia Moreno in a narrow office that smelled of burnt coffee and old paper, far from the polished floors of the federal courthouse. She was younger than most prosecutors who handled cases like this, but her eyes carried the weariness of someone who had already learned how often the system disappointed the people it claimed to serve. "If we move too fast, they'll bury it," she said, tapping a legal pad with her pen. "If we move too slow, someone else dies." Elias nodded. "Then we give them a chance to show us exactly who they are." They crafted the plan carefully. No theatrics, no shortcuts. A controlled situation. A cooperating patient, wired legally, presenting the same symptoms Naomi had. The same language. The same fear. Everything documented. Everything clean. The hospital agreed to the evaluation without question. Dr. Preston Hargrove was still untouchable in their eyes. Respected, trusted, protected. That arrogance was the final opening. Elias listened from a secure room as the recording streamed in. The sound was clear. Too clear. "I'm telling you, you're not dying," Hargrove said calmly. "Some patients perceive pain more intensely. It's cultural, emotional." The words landed like blows. "But I can't feel the baby," the woman said, her voice shaking exactly the way Naomi's had. "You're anxious," Hargrove replied, "and anxiety can mimic physical distress. Try to stay calm and behave like an adult." Laia closed her eyes briefly as the recording continued. Statistically, Hargrove added, almost conversationally, "These cases don't require immediate escalation. We see this kind of exaggeration often. Often." That was the moment the case locked into place. Search warrants followed within days. Financial records surfaced. Settlement agreements. Sealed complaints. Emails that spoke plainly when no one thought they would ever be read aloud. Gail Renshaw folded first. Her lawyer called before the agents even reached her office. By the time Elias saw her again, she looked smaller, her confidence replaced by something brittle and frantic. She talked quickly, listing protocols, pressures, expectations. She said she had only been managing risk. "What about managing people?" Elias asked quietly. She did not answer. Detective Vince Mallory lasted longer. He tried charm, then intimidation, then silence. None of it held. The recording of his visit to Elias's home played back in a courtroom. His casual warnings suddenly stripped of context and exposed for what they were. Witness intimidation, abuse of authority. His badge was taken without ceremony. Dr. Hargrove was arrested at the hospital. Patients watched as federal agents led him through the same hallway where Naomi had died. His posture was rigid, his face pale with disbelief. He did not look at Elias. By the time it was over, headlines called it justice, a victory, a reckoning. Elias did not feel any of it. He stood outside the courthouse afterward, holding his daughter against his chest, listening to reporters ask questions that no longer mattered. "Do you feel closure?" one of them asked. Elias looked down at the small, sleeping face pressed against his shoulder. Naomi's eyes were there, her mouth, her calm strength. "No," he said honestly, "I feel absence," because justice had arrived carrying handcuffs and court orders. But Naomi had needed it hours earlier, days earlier, years earlier. He understood then what the final price truly was. The system had finally responded. The truth had finally been acknowledged. The guilty had finally been named, and none of it could bring her back. Justice had come. It had just come too late for the woman who mattered most. The hospital changed, but not because it wanted to. New policies appeared first. Committees, oversight boards, mandatory reviews with language that sounded serious enough to satisfy the public. Doctors attended trainings they quietly resented. Administrators learned new phrases about accountability and equity. The building looked the same from the outside, but inside, fear had replaced confidence. Fear of being watched, fear of being recorded, fear of being exposed. The most visible change came months later, when a modest brick building opened 3 blocks away from the main hospital, the Naomi Ward Maternal Care Center. No grand architecture, no donors' names etched into marble, just a place designed to listen. Before it decided, midwives and nurses who spoke plainly, doctors required to explain, not dismiss. Every patient complaint documented, escalated, followed through. People lined up on opening day, Black mothers, brown mothers, women who had learned, often too late, how fragile safety could be when the system decided you were inconvenient. Elias stood at the back of the crowd, his daughter balanced on his hip. She was heavier now, stronger, curious eyes scanning the world as if it owed her something. He lived alone with her in the quiet house Naomi had once filled with plans and laughter. Mornings were routine now. Bottles warmed, diapers changed, tiny shoes lined neatly by the door, even though she was not walking yet. Some nights, when the house grew still, Elias sat in the nursery and felt the weight of what was missing press against him without warning. Naomi's absence was not loud. It was constant. Raising their daughter alone was not the hardest part. Explaining the world to her someday would be. He wondered how he would tell her about the night her mother died, about how close he had been, about the moment he chose silence because he believed calm obedience was the same as protection. He understood now that it never was. Justice did not arrive to fix what had been broken. It arrived to show how long it had been allowed to stay broken. The trials ended, sentences were handed down, headlines faded. The public moved on to the next outrage, the next story demanding attention. Elias did not. He stayed involved quietly, reviewing policy drafts, speaking with families who needed guidance more than speeches, sitting across kitchen tables, listening to stories that sounded too familiar. He never called himself a hero. He never spoke Naomi's name as a symbol. To him, she was still the woman who hummed when she was nervous, the woman who trusted that being heard was a right, not a privilege. On the day his daughter took her first unsteady steps, Elias caught her. Before she fell, she laughed, fearless, unaware of how much the world had already taken from her. He held her close and felt something settle inside him at last. Not peace, not closure, responsibility. Because the lesson Naomi's death had carved into him was not about vengeance or victory. It was about attention, about what happens when people with power decide whose pain deserves urgency and whose can wait, about how silence does not protect the vulnerable. It protects the system that harms them. Some nights do not just change lives. They reveal systems that were broken long before anyone screamed.